as a college professor, I have students, they're born in something ridiculous, like the year 2002. You know, they're really born after Tupac died. That's how I look at it, you know. And there's a 6-year-old today that will live to see the year 2100. We talk a lot about innovating and designing and building and business. The reality is, this is the context that everything we're creating in whatever sector needs to be thinking about. That there are humans alive today that will live to see the year 2100. And that's the foundation of what I want to share. That we can't be boxed into a genre of being. Frantz Fanon, from one of my favorite books, he says, each generation must out of relative obscurity discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it. What this generation will create, we don't know yet. We talk about them like the younger generation now as the social media generation. The people who created social media are my age or older. The first AI lab at Stanford University was created in the 1950s. So even when we talk about AI, we think about it as this like new thing, when of course it isn't. We are the last of the terrestrials. The question is, who are we in relation to the times that we live in? These are the times that we live in. We live in times where the earth is burning, fires are raging, even for insects. They are impacted, of course, by what's happening in the world. Planet Earth is going through its 6th mass extinction event in history, and everything seems to indicate that insects are going to bear the brunt. Insects are facing extinction 8 times faster than mammals, birds, and reptiles. This will have a massive impact because insects are pivotal to the functioning of our ecosystems. So even when I start looking at people in biology that are dealing with insects, they're talking about what does it look like for insects to be on other planets. Insects are last of the terrestrials. If you are a scientist in Honduras, you are the last of a terrestrial. If you are a migrant coming into Texas, you are last of terrestrial. If you're coming from the Sudan into Europe, you're the last of the terrestrial. If you're a gringo in Connecticut, you're last of the terrestrial. If you're a model in New York, you're last of a terrestrial. If you're an African American graduating from a historically black university, you're last of a terrestrial. No matter what your background is, how you identify, we are all last of the terrestrials. This generation is interesting because this generation is the first generation at mass to be given a camera and point it back at themselves. The self-generation, self-E. My students, young people that we employ, they are not confused about the fact that they matter. You will listen to me. You will listen to what I believe in. You will hear me. I have these sensitivities. I want you to hear this. And it's unique. It's a different type of sensitivity. And I'm interested in what that will create. Another thing about the generation that we're in is it used to be, remember your mom would answer the phone and she had like a at-home voice and then an outside the house voice, you know? So your mom would go, hi, hello, yeah, shut up, and then back to like talking different, you know? This is blending for all of us, the idea of working at home, learning at home. This is a definitive part of our generation. Another thing that I think of when I travel, I've been blessed to be able to see a lot of this world. And I noticed the difference between the East and West. Here's one thing that's key. Indigenous people name things after the environment that they think exist in. So for example, if the indigenous people see a mountain and the sun rises over the mountain, they go, oh, that is Sunrise Mountain. Europeans go, there's a mountain, my name is Anderson, that's Anderson Peak. This is a fundamental difference in the way we're seeing the world. Anyone recognize this here? This a cold moment in gringo history right here? God damn, look at this. The gringo carved their face in the mountain. Can you imagine being an Indio seeing this? One curiosity I have about this generation globally is, can we create in the context that we exist in without feeling the need to see ourselves reflected everywhere? That we only can acknowledge something if we see ourselves reflected in it. And of course, that matters for business developing in a Latin American context. Can we build and design and innovate in this part of the world while at the same time not needing to see ourselves reflected in everything if we are a foreigner to be here? And I want to talk about that. Creative leadership involves powerful blend of sensitivity and confidence. I shared this with a group yesterday. I'm a student of the Buddha, and one of my favorite fables from Buddhism is a story where there's an ox, and there's young men, and they see the ox, and they want to be strong like the ox, and they go, you know what? We want to be strong like the ox. We're going to kill the ox. We're going to eat the ox so we can be strong. But they forgot an essential thing. The ox only eats grass. That the strength and power and might in the ox comes from consuming the most delicate thing in the environment. All main influencers of markets are attitudes of the masses, technology, governmental climate, environment, and the economy. I believe that as we, as the last of the terrestrials, start to think about how we're going to grow and expand, we have to have an increased commingling of these things. We talk about technology or environment or government in very separate sectors, as if they're not interdependent of one another. Also, I hear us talking about emerging markets as if emerging markets is like this straight line. This is what an emerging market actually looks like. It's a beautiful, radical, potential-filled chaos. It's not a straight line moving forward, you know. Emerging markets is not a beautiful stream coming out of a river. It's a storm in your stomach, you know. This is what we're dealing with. And then eventually, from the hype and the enthusiasm and the doubt, the big ideas, old habits, and competition, there's this idea for market and market tensions that I like to think about as an opportunity for real evolution in how we're moving. And again, us having to rework our thinking around being competitive in our thinking, being competitive and linear in how we're moving, and how can we move in a more fluid way. So the tensions being reframed is essential. As last of the terrestrials, it's really important that infrastructure becomes bigger than sentiment. I live in the United States. 3 years ago, the sentiment was very different on the political sphere, on the consumer sphere, on the business. You could say something like, hey, there's some people over here that don't have as much as them. We should help them. You could say that 3 years ago. 3 years ago, public radio was not being threatened to be taken away. There was great sentiment, but the infrastructure was not as solid. I want to warn everyone that the next slide that I'm going to share has a sensitive historical mark. Is that okay? Yeah, it's cool. We can handle that. Some of the darkest moments in global history, the sentiment was horrible, but the infrastructure was even more brutal. Hitler had a sentiment that Jews were less than Germans in the world. But they built a brutal infrastructure for how they would exterminate Jews. The transatlantic slave trade had a horrible sentiment that said that black people were less than everyone else in the world and could be sold like animals. But an infrastructure and a design of ships to maximize the capacity of African people being shipped was there. So when I listen to us talking about wanting to innovate, wanting to build ideas, I encourage us to make sure that the infrastructure for our beautiful ideas in bioeconomies, in new technologies and textures, in AI, in providing food for people in rural areas, in healthcare, all of the wonderful things that we're designing around, that we design impeccable infrastructure around it that is stronger than darker forces that are in the world. If I was to do this is a silly dance. I do this and it's a weird dance. I do this and it's kind of a crazy dance. But if I move it all out of that area of my body and I bring it here, It's a forbidden dance. Thank you, someone out there making me blush. But it's a forbidden dance. Of course, the forbidden dance is an actual thing. I'm going to go through this really fast. The forbidden dance in the last 2 decades of the 19th century, the dance known as the tango, emerges out of immigrant culture of Argentina's dockside slums. The tango fuses New World African and European dance styles. The proper society, they did not like the tango. They said, oh, no, it has to do with illicit sex. It's bad. It's evil. We have to ban the dance. And the dance literally became forbidden. Not forbidden like, oh, no, forbidden. No, no, no. Forbidden. Policia forbidden. Clubs where the tango is danced are raided and closed by the police. They deplore the dance's popularity and its progression from the brothels to downtown cafes and dance halls. It's a forbidden dance. But after a while in Europe, they get into the tango. It's not the same tango, but it's like, it still is the tango, And in time, France and England, North America, it becomes a craze. The European version smooths off tango's rough edges, and dancers wear evening dresses and patent leather shoes. Another thing that's interesting, when I was doing my research on this, in the 20s, America, some women danced the tango wearing special bumpers to prevent inappropriate touching. God, I spent a lot of money trying to find a picture of this. We sent staff to the eco library, find a picture. No photos, but definitely in the record. So I had to draw it myself. I imagine it looks something like ridiculous like this, Like, hey, dude, would you like to dance with me? It's very, very strange, European approval renders the tango acceptable to Argentinians, and by the 1920s evolved into a national folk treasure. These are the people at the turn of the century that the dances emerged from. This photo is taken from the same people, same area, 2014. And the same thing has always been the case, whether it's ideas around women's rights, hip-hop culture, poor farmers, civil rights, people being able to vote, immigration in different parts of the world. Definitely what we're seeing, the attitudes towards migrant workers, is that it's forbidden until the rest of the world says it's okay, and then we say it's okay. So this other thing that I'm thinking about as last of the terrestrials in Latin America is not having to wait for the approval of the other part of the world to say that we can be confident to step out and be who we are wherever we are in the world and own our ideas as our own. The greatest migration in American history is when 10 million black people leave the South and change the face of the country. We left the South. We followed the railroad, so did poor white people. And we talk about that migration in America, but I want to talk about this one in the times that we're in. These are the Bruceros coming from Mexico during World War II. The newspapers showed the ideas like this, like here are workers that are coming from Mexico to help work in the fields during the war, and it was these kind of clean-cut images of the story. This is the actual story. The La Raza came into the country and they were sprayed with DDT and poison and bug spray. They were searched for drugs. They served on the farmlands, and when the war ended and the people came back, the tensions became high. And from that, people working in the fields became our heroes who stood up and organized, and they went into the cities and they said, we want rights for all people. We want justice for all people. And the people here were having the same time and in the same place. They were having close proximity to other movements that were saying, we want people to live, we want people to be free. And this was happening in close proximity to other movements like the American Indian movement, in close proximity to a women's feminist movement, in close proximities to a United Farm Workers movement, in close proximity to a postal health environmental movement. We think about environmental conversations like today. Look how ahead you had to be in 1964 when this picture was taken to be talking about the environment and thinking about generations to come. And we saw these movements happening side by side. And Dr. Martin Luther King was killed in America in 1968. Ronald Reagan becomes president in 1980. Seems like a long time. It's just 12 years. And in America, a drug thing hits big in America, but of course it's happening in other parts of the world too, where people are impacted by this issue. And this time, the reaction is cultural. And we see in hip-hop and through all these different cultures, like people standing up and saying something and it being exciting. And again, the culture is raging like it is now, and I go back to thinking about infrastructure. and infrastructure in nature being so important, and that infrastructure is natural, and that humans being separate from the rest of nature is a human construct. We come up with this idea that we are separate from nature. Also, we're primed for community, but we're burdened by independence. And where do we get off thinking we're better than nature anyway? Here's a giraffe, just born, 2 hours old. This is a fish. The fish is born swimming. This horse is so new to the world, it's galloping on the mom is still on the floor from giving birth. This is the best you get out of us. No comparison, not even close. We do things to try to look cute. No, very beautiful babies, but totally useless. We are born totally dependent, totally. This is a 2-year-old lion. This is a 2-year-old human. Not even close. We celebrate them for pooping in a line. If you know a 4-year-old, very independent. Let me do it. I want to do it. I'm independent. Let me do it. It's a very important part of a child's development to be independent and to be on our own and learn our confidence. But then our children start to go to school and we start to ask them, what about your grades? How are you doing? How are you behaving? What do you want to be when you grow up? The students get in college very independent. I sit on boards that admit students into universities. The only time the kids are not talking about themselves is when they talked about what they did for someone else so that they could put it on their application so they could get into college. It's still independent. We become young professionals. Oh, I am a CEO. I'm a great leader. I'm a leader. We have a lot of conversations about independent leaders. With so many people focused on leading, I start thinking, well, damn, like, who's the workers? If we're so focused on leaders, as last of the terrestrials, who are the workers? Independent. I don't know. I see these advertisements where I live, independent living for seniors. Independence is important, but we're extrapolating it 70 years. Independence is childish. Thinking about ourselves being centered, only able to function as individuals is childish. Of course, we're born dependent. We should spend time having independence, but real maturity, and this is not a new idea, is through interdependence. Our ability to work and flow and connect and build with each other and co-creating in our design. Another thing is last of the terrestrials, I want to say, when we talk about equity and everyone being thought of, equity isn't about having the opportunity to succeed. Equity is about the opportunity to try, fail, and come back again without being fired or being labeled. I was in my car listening to the radio, NPR, and on the news they come on and they say, oh, SpaceX, the rocket exploded. And I was like, oh no, like didn't anyone get hurt, And then eventually they call on one of the PR people, and they said, well, how are you feeling? We're glad no one is hurt. How do you feel about the failure of this rocket? And I pulled over my car when the guy says this. He goes, oh, no, it wasn't a failure. It was a rapid, unplanned disassembly. I said, God damn, they got great language for failing, Gwyneth Paltrow, famous actress, she's married, she gets a divorce. I see her in an interview, they say, how are you dealing with the failure of your marriage? She says, oh, no, it's not a failed marriage. It's a conscious uncoupling. Last of the terrestrials, we need to borrow from this thinking. That our look at and how we think about failing is just, the failure is a step towards being successful and doing something different. We need to have anticipatory design in how we build. It's important that we anticipate when we design because there's nothing more shocking to the human psyche than sudden change. And also, when what was once forbidden becomes permissible, immediately there are gaping voids in infrastructure, access, and safety design. I want to give two examples. And it's not just some exploration space, it's urgent. In America, the Civil Rights Bill was signed into act. This is Johnson, this is Martin Luther King. They're signing saying, it is no longer legal on a federal level to discriminate, basically. I'm definitely paraphrasing. And then the next day, they had to send the National Guard into the South to protect little children going to school. Anticipatory design would have said, hey, the Ku Klux Klan's been around 70 years, slavery was here for 400 years. Maybe we send the National Guard before we sign this into obviously. We've been dealing with students at Stanford, talking to them about the rise of sales for EVs, which continues to climb. What I can't believe about the EV thing, I drive an electric vehicle, we haven't figured out what to do with the battery. This is an example of a mix-up in the anticipatory design and how we pace. And how can we think differently about that? Marijuana, electric vehicles, microdosing of substances classified as drugs, same-sex marriage, migrating interracial marriage, and voting are all examples of things that within the last 75 years in America and other places could land someone in prison or worse. We live in crazy times. I'm in Las Vegas. I'm walking through the casino. Now, mind you, I wasn't at this conference. I don't want you to think I was at this conference. Nothing wrong with it. I just wasn't there. I was walking through the casino. They got a cannabis conference. Open, sponsored, big, thousands of people going. The world is changing. But listen, when my mom was in high school, evil Mexican plants that drive you insane. That's in the New York Times. And I wonder, what about the things that right now we are saying, oh, no, no, no. You give it 30 years and it's going to shift. And as last of the terrestrials, maybe we can stop bogging ourselves down with taboos and things that we're afraid of, instead build differently. Same thing for all of these things that we see that are popular now when there are times where they didn't exist before. I want to end with sharing a story. It's one of my favorite stories. The story goes that a long, long time ago, way before there was any people on earth, all there was animals. Lions, tigers, bears, oh my, this kind of thing, And all the animals, they got along until one day they woke up and it was people on the earth. And the people were out their mind, tackling possums, eating butterflies, So the animals say, hold on, cuz. That's how they talk even back then, They go, hold on, man. We got to figure out what we're going to do to get out of this situation. We're going to have a meeting on top of Volcano Mountain at 3 o'clock. So they all agree, and all the animals, around 2:30, you see all the animals, lions, tigers, bears, oh my, flapping up to the top. Even the fish is flapping. The elephants are walking. The horses are going. The frogs are jumping. The elephant, she's in line, swaying back and forth like this. She looks out the line. She sees the chicken coming back this way. She steps out the line. She goes, excuse me, Mr. Chicken, don't you know we're on our way to a meeting to define our destiny? The chicken said, man, I'm not trying to hear all that save the animal crap. It's my birthday. He popped his feathers and kept it moving the other way. I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. So they get up to the top of the meeting, the draft. She's leading the meeting. Order, order, order. She bangs her draft hoofy foot on a tree stump, She says, who's got the first idea of what it is we can do to get out of this situation? The gopher comes out the ground. Well, that's how the gopher talk, Well, I know what we can do. We can all build a spaceship, get on it, fly away, and then the people can't eat us no more. And the bear was a brother. He was leaning on a tree. He said, man, it's the year 1. Where the hell are we going to get a spaceship from? And all the animals laughed at the gopher. The bear said, what we should do, we should choose one animal that all the animals is here. The people can eat that animal and leave us alone. I say we sacrifice the goat. And the goat said, bad idea, man. No. You can't sacrifice me, man. I got to take my kids to the doctor tomorrow. No. Who we should sacrifice is the duck. And the duck said, The duck didn't even have a reason. Just, The duck said, no. Who we should sacrifice is the monkey. And the monkey was fly. The monkey came out the tree. Ooh, no, you can't sacrifice me, man. I got to take my kids to the grocery store tomorrow. No. Who we should sacrifice is the bear. And the bear said, all I know is the next person to speak on me in sacrificing, there's going to be a problem. Who we should sacrifice is the chicken. And everyone looked to the left. They looked to the right. Of course, the chicken is at the party by himself. So they took a vote. 1, 2, 3, sacrificed. I think the problem is often we're at the wrong meeting, focused on the wrong things. As the last of the terrestrials, particularly in emerging markets in the world, the right meeting is the meeting where we join each other collaboratively, we think about where we've been, but be super imaginative and not waste our time going through the same slow motions that we have in the past. I've been really grateful for your time and hearing me today. Thank you. All of you.